Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.
Yo, what is going on, guys? We are back for week 12 of the Everything Ravens podcast. My name is Logan. I'm the host of this podcast. I run the Instagram account at everything_Ravens, which is the biggest Ravens fan page community on Instagram, sitting at nearly 40,000 followers. As we start this recording, make sure you follow me on that account, as well as follow at Everything Ravens podcast, which is the podcast account managed by our executive producer, Spencer, which gives you all the latest updates involving this podcast. So last week we brought on the Bengals fan page for our weekly game reviews. This week we are going to bring on a Browns fan page. A Browns fan page that is quite popular with the Ravens fan page. So bringing on someone whose also name is Logan, which is Browns Culture. So introduce yourself.
I am Browns Culture on Instagram, and I run a Browns fan page.
And this week we are also joined by Brooks and Kyrie again. They were unable to join last week, but they're back this week.
Hey guys, it's Brooks. Excited to be back. Excited to go over this week's topics.
I came back at the perfect time to trash talk a Browns fan. Perfect.
So yeah, the Ravens and the Browns, it's becoming quite a rivalry. We play them week 1 and week 14. Week 1 in Baltimore, week 14 Monday Night Football in Cleveland. What are your guys' thoughts on these games?
Well, we already kind of broke down these games a little bit back on, I think it was episode 2 of the podcast when we went over the schedule, but a lot has changed since then, primarily in that week 1 matchup. I talked about how the Ravens do such a good job week 1 and how the Browns historically don't do such a great job. However, with how crazy this offseason has been, and they just announced all preseason games canceled. The Ravens historically dominate preseason football. You wonder how much that translates to week 1 preparation. That game becomes a lot more important to me, getting off to a hot start. And they've also talked about if there were to be any delays in the schedule, week 1 would be pushed back and moved to week 17, and a whole schedule would slide up. So we could see, 2 of these games late in the schedules, the other matchups week 14. But right now, as it sits, we have one early season meeting with them, and then again late at the end of our primetime games in week 14.
I think the Browns matchup should be interesting because last season, beginning of the season, early on, Baker Mayfield basically shredded the Ravens defense. We lost in overtime. That was a tough game to watch. And then late in the season, we was able to win, but only by 2 points. So this Browns team has been challenging to the Ravens in recent memory, but overall, the Ravens have dominated the matchup 31-11, winning the majority of the games. Joe Flacco has been when he used to be a quarterback, was a terror for the Browns, winning over 10 games against them. So usually we've had luck against the Browns. To me, I'm more interested in the drama. You got a new head coach again, Baker Mayfield, who I love coming out of college from Oklahoma. This is like do or die for him this season. You got OBJ there again, Jarvis Landry. You got even more weapons, Hooper. The Browns should be the favorites to win the division, even though we all know that the Ravens will win it. I'm more interested in the drama that's going to unfold with the Browns. Is this team going to crumble? Or are they going to be a surprise and rise up and actually go to the playoffs? That's what I'm more interested about because I don't really think this year there'll be much of a threat to the Ravens as they were last year. Even though on the paper they did get better. I just like what the Ravens did in the draft overall, and I feel like they're a better team from last season.
Yeah, I know what you're saying with the record of Joe Flacco and how the Ravens have historically matched up against the Browns, but to Cleveland's credit, I've always thought they've raised their level of competition against the Ravens and always had hard-fought games, even in those years that they struggled more. You go down back last year, obviously the early season loss, but even in that late season game in Cleveland, they really kept the Ravens offense in check for the majority of the first half until Lamar started running that 2-minute drill and had 2 quick drives to get the Ravens back on track. But I really think this Baker-Lamar matchup, if you remember the first time they met, was week 17 of their rookie seasons. And that was, they were both highly rated quarterbacks. It was a game for the Ravens to go to the playoffs. And Baker threw 3 interceptions, including that last one by C.J. Mosley to seal the game. And that was kind of the first introduction of this matchup. And since then, the rivalry in the AFC has sort of been shifted from that Baker-Lamar matchup that people were kind of expecting to get for the next decade to Mahomes and Lamar, which I think we'll get that third saga of that week 3. But this first saga for Baker and Lamar in week 1 will be interesting because Baker, he did really have a sophomore slump, in my opinion, but he has all the talent in the world and all the tools to get back on track in year 3. So if he's able to put it together, I think this is a big make or break year for Baker Mayfield, and I still think he wants to get in that conversation of the Lamar, the Mahomes, and get in that sort of rivalry matchup, and it kind of starts week 1 being a little bit of a tone setter.
I think it's an interesting subject, and I'm excited to see Baker versus Lamar. I still think it can be a really good rivalry, and I think it will be a good rivalry for as long as they're both at the top of their game.
You know, as someone who watches Baker a little bit more closely, Logan, how do you think, or what steps do you think he needs to take in year 3? And do you think he regressed in year 2? What can the Browns do to implement in their offensive system to make him more comfortable back there and make him more successful?
I think number one in making him a successful quarterback is changing his mechanics, changing his footwork, his throwing motion, because it was all messed up. He had no coaching last year, and that was pretty evident between Freddie Kitchens and his quarterback coach. So with new mechanics from Alex Van Pelt, who we got from the Bengals to be our quarterback coach, and then with a new offensive line, actual healthy tight ends this year, which he can utilize, I think he's obviously going to succeed. People want to say he was in a great situation last year, and it just wasn't true when you really looked into it. So I think he did have a sophomore slump, and it was disappointing, but I learned a lot as a Browns fan watching it, and I think our organization learned a lot, and it was a breaking point in our becoming successful with franchise quarterbacks. I think it was a breaking point.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, I think it's the first time in a long time we've seen a Browns quarterback sort of underperform and the fan base still hold out hope that he will bounce back the next year. We've kind of seen them do one and dump with quarterbacks for the last 2 decades. They've had more starters than anyone else in the league. And I think, Baker, you are correct in saying that there was so much optimism heading into last year, but people really failed to look at the fact that, the offensive line wasn't what it needed to be for a second-year quarterback. The defense didn't really step up in situations that they needed to, and kind of made a lot rest on Baker's shoulders. But where I would love to see Baker progress, and where I think his next step needs to be, is he needs to be a little bit more of a leader out there. I thought he blamed some stuff. I remember him blaming there was too much noise in the Cleveland Stadium when they were on offense. Just a lot of small things across the board where Lamar already in his second year, I feel like did a great job, even though the spotlight was mostly on him being a team player first. And Baker, with all the toxic energy in the Browns locker room, needs to step up and be the face and voice of reason, and sort of get that offense back on track.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lot easier to be a good leader when things are going right, because there's not much to blame on Lamar's side. I mean, he can't blame anything besides maybe he's young or he's inexperienced, which he kind of verbally came out and did. So when you're on Baker's side, you have so much to blame, and it's hard to not blame it because you're under succeeding and people are putting it on you when it's on you, but it's not really on you because you're basically in an island. So I think he is a good leader, but he definitely struggled with being a leader. And I think he will be a great leader this year when things are going right.
I mean, in my opinion, honestly, I think the biggest part of being a quarterback is being a leader. You're the main person on the team. Everyone's going to look to you to lead by example. And I think Lamar does a great job of doing that. Lamar, at his young age, already shows excellent maturity. His teammates love him, where I think Baker's a little bit of a different story. Like you said, when things go right, he'll probably be a better leader. But you mentioned that things weren't going right, and that's why he was acting the way he did. And I think that's an issue, because when things aren't going your way, I think that's where you even show more of your true character, show more leadership, and you step up and be even more of a leader in faces of adversity. So I don't think Baker's a bust yet, like a lot of people are ruling him out. I think he definitely should get a few more chances. But if he continues to regress, then maybe you could consider adding him to that infamous Browns quarterback shirt.
Yeah, I don't see him getting either regressing or staying at his point with the upgrades we made at coaching, offensive line, and just everything. And you can go forever with the improvements we've made. And when you really look at it, it's evident why he struggled, and it's evident why he won't struggle next year. And you'll be at his rookie form or you'll be better than his rookie form.
And speaking of coaching, what do you think of the hire of Kevin Stefanski coming from Minnesota? He was kind of coordinating that Gary Kubiak offense, running the ball, Dalvin Cook. I think that's going to help Baker because I feel like they're going to run the ball more with Nick Chubb. What do you think about that? How is this dynamic now? Instead of Freddie Kitchens, who a lot of people say, hey, him and Baker did great things. The offensive coordinator got the head coaching job. It went south. How does Kevin Stefanski kind of come in and kind of help Baker take that next step?
If Stefanski does what he did in Minnesota, it's perfect for Baker. Baker's a play-action quarterback, and that's evident. He's along the Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehills and Jimmy Garoppolo's of the NFL. And when we put in Freddie to run the same offense we ran in 2018, and he just didn't do that. And it was at the extent of Baker Mayfield for the players. And obviously the players underperformed for multiple reasons also, which just kind of is the Browns' luck. So when Kevin Stefanski comes in and he runs that play-action offense, it's going to perfectly fit Baker, and it's going to let him play to his best ability.
Yeah, and on top of that, the Browns will now have a full season of Kareem Hunt. So he'll have two tools and playmakers in that backfield to work with. All the more reason to believe that he'll find more success in year 3.
I mean, yeah, when you look at Kareem Hunt, if you thought he was good last year, I think he's going to be even better this year. And I have a particular hot take that Kareem is a better scheme fit than Nick Chubb for the offense. So I think Kareem as a rotation guy is going to be phenomenal for us. I think he's going to average 5.5 per carry and multiple touchdowns, and I wouldn't be surprised because how good he is for the offense and as a player.
Back to like the Kevin Stefanski hire, I think one of the biggest things with Kevin Stefanski is no matter how much I dislike the Browns, I can't deny they have a lot of talent. They're probably a top 10 most talented roster in the league, whether it's Baker, OBJ, Myles Garrett, whoever. But I think you have to be able to control that talent if you're Cleveland. And last year you saw with Freddie Kitchens, they were not able to control that talent at all. I think just as much as having that talent, you have to control all those egos. So that's going to be a lot on Kevin Stefanski's shoulders, especially for a guy who has no head coaching experience prior. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, you can look at Kevin Stefanski and say he doesn't have head coach experience, but he also has a lot of experience in the league, which you could also say for Freddie Kitchens, which isn't good for his case, obviously. But again, he just has to run what he ran in Minnesota, and I think that's all we need. I think he's a great professional. He's brought the guys better together than I've seen before. Like, I've never seen the social media aspect that we have this year of guys training, of guys, hyping each other up in Instagram comments, even that. So I think they're not even in the same building right now, yet we've controlled the egos over screen, which is very impressive.
Yeah, we're sort of dancing around the term here, the word culture. I think we've been talking a lot about the Redskins and their culture lately, as that's kind of consumed football media over these past couple of weeks. And, the Browns, they have a different type of culture, but they're sort of leaning towards that direction. They were the only team to go after and sign Kareem Hunt. They extended Myles Garrett after what happened last season. And not that they were the only team to trade or look to trade for OBJ, but they ended up pulling the trigger on that and overlooking his attitude problems. And I think when you have all those egos and you make all those decisions to sort of look at talent above personality, you have to have a head coach that they respect and that can kind of rein that in. And I think Freddie Kitchens just could not do that to any degree last season. If Stefanski could get in there and control that talent and have it make bigger headlines on the field than off the field, I think the Browns are looking at a very successful roster. But you're looking at a lot of players across the board here who could be potential wild cards and problems for that Browns team. And as we saw in years past, it's sort of been a domino effect, as it only takes one player to go off the rails on social media or in a post-game interview on the sidelines with all the cameras watching for a team to sort of self-implode.
Yeah, and I think Stefanski can handle it well, because you think back to Minnesota and Stephon Diggs could have been labeled as a problem, and yet nothing really escalated more than, I mean, his rants maybe, or I don't really know what happened with Diggs, but I know that he was labeled a problem by a lot of people. So I think if one person does become a problem, perhaps, then I don't think it's gonna be that big of like a it's not gonna be that big of a problem. But anything could happen. Obviously, you can't control a human's emotions, especially very vocal ones that we have.
You saw a lot last year where Browns players' egos got the best of them. I can think of two very notable instances where that happened. Obviously, the Myles Garrett where he hit Mason Rudolph with his helmet, and also going back to Week 4 where OBJ got into the fight with Marlon Humphrey, and that's very surprising to get under Humphrey's skin like that. Humphrey, who's like one of the most quiet, humble players in the league, doesn't really talk much. That's why he doesn't get the attention that like someone like Jalen Ramsey gets, but you saw what happened between him and OBJ. So, like I said, controlling those egos on the Browns will be a big part in determining their success.
And while we're talking about culture, I think when you think about that, is it always starts from the top, and I think that's the owner. I know last week Bengals was the conversation, and we was talking about you guys were talking about Mike Brown as far as being one of the worst owners in the NFL. But as a Cleveland Browns fan, what do you think about Jimmy Haslam, who I think a lot of people can make an argument that he does not have a very good record as an owner of an NFL team. He's basically the guy. He comes in, he hires you, then you have a year to like do something, and then now you're fired. Even if you show some progress, you're still fired. What are your thoughts on Jimmy Haslam being an owner and as far as that culture in Cleveland?
I don't really, I don't have like a definite opinion on him, but I know he's grown a lot, and I know he's become a better football mind because it was kind of evident he was really bad back in the days of the 2010s, I think, when he bought the team. He bought the team somewhere in the 2010s, and he just didn't really know what he was doing. But he's grown a lot since then, and I think once he hired John Dorsey, I think that's really when he took off as an NFL mind, and he's really held a good culture in the front office at least, because he showed that he was the dominant one, I guess, which has the pros and cons of firing John Dorsey after he showed a clear ego. So I think I like him a decent amount, but I don't like him a decent amount. He's just whatever, and I think I'm content with him being a owner.
Yeah, sort of backtracking to a little bit more of the players on the field and less of the off-field issues that surround the Browns. Last year, the fan base was very upset with a lot of the decision-making of Baker Mayfield on third down in crucial situations, not targeting Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, but looking in other directions. I think they did a nice job bringing aboard Austin Hooper, who's a little bit more of a security blanket type player, who could be a nice guy in third down situations when you're just looking for a catch and not looking for anything more explosive. But what are your expectations for Odell Beckham in his second year in Cleveland, and how do you think they'll try to get those guys more involved in the offense?
I just expect Odell and our guys to do what Stefanski asked them to do because I have faith in Stefanski, and I hope they have faith in Stefanski. I think Odell's really going to adapt to the Stephon Diggs role of the offense that Stefanski runs, and that really it's very deep threat based. So Odell will be a primary deep threat in my opinion, unless things change, which I don't think they will. So with Odell, I expect him to be a deep threat and be what Stephon Diggs did, and attribute to the offense the best he can do. And then with Hooper, I think Hooper's just probably a perfect tight end for Baker. He's not a perfect tight end for the offense, but it's all about Baker Mayfield. And when Baker Mayfield's playing well, the offense is playing well, rather that be just overall successful or Baker's fueling it. So I think with Jarvis, Hooper, and Odell, I think those are our three main receivers, obviously. You got Njoku as a kind of flex receiver at tight end. That he's going to be a kind of vertical threat, deep threat too. He's going to make big plays for us, hopefully, if he stays or if we don't trade him. So I really like the receiving group. I think I like Higgins. I like Donovan Peoples-Jones, the depth. It's a very good group.
Yeah, and Njoku did request a trade. We could go over that in a second. But you did bring up that Diggs-Odell comparison. Minnesota, prominent two wide receivers. They didn't really utilize their depth too much, and you kind of expect Jarvis Landry to slide in that Adam Thielen type role, and um, Odell to take that Stephon Diggs type role. And my only area of concern for that is I know Diggs was productive, but early in the season, Diggs' numbers were sort of down. He was taking to social media saying he was trying to request a trade. It ended up being mostly a bluff until this offseason rolled around. And then Thielen actually got hurt in the Lions game, and Diggs became the only receiver, and that's when his numbers kind of spiked. So you wonder if Thielen were to stay healthy, what would have happened to Diggs, if there would have been more drama involving that. And then when Thielen did come back in the playoffs, they were winning a playoff game on the road in the Superdome, and Diggs is on the sideline complaining about not getting enough targets. So I think I understand that as a personal story, but when you talk about Odell and Diggs having similarities both on and off the field, you wonder if Jarvis ends up taking that out of Thielen role and is that possession receiver. 2 years of Odell not really getting enough targets, in his opinion, if that's going to wear on him, and if he's going to lash out.
I definitely understand that, and I think Odell's going to take his role plus more because Odell is ultimately a better wide receiver in my opinion, and I think Stefanski, he might know that, he might not, but I think he'll become true to that as Odell kind of shows his real ability as he's coming back from injury. I think Odell, he's gonna play a role. I think he's gonna make, just like Njoku, he's gonna make big plays. He's gonna be a deep threat. But besides that, I don't really see much because he made it evident that he doesn't want to run slants. He doesn't want to run fades pretty much. He wants to run post routes, streak routes, or just routes down the field, which he did run last year. He just didn't get to show his true ability, nor did Baker get the ball off to him because of the offensive line or the time Baker had or just the pressure that was getting to him.
Yeah, I think a big thing for the Browns offense this season will be trying to get Odell more targets early in the season, try to get his confidence and chemistry up with Baker Mayfield. I remember a crucial third down last year in the Ravens-Browns games in Cleveland. They ran double seam routes down the sidelines, each one-on-one coverage. And Baker looked towards Ratley instead of a 50-50 ball with Odell. He went with 50 ball with Ratley, and Browns fans were just upset about the logic behind that. You brought Odell in to win those 50-50 balls. You have to have faith in your guys. And it just seemed like, at least in year one, Baker and Odell didn't seem to have that confidence in each other. I understand there were problems with the offensive line and Odell not being able to complete his routes before the pass rush got to Baker. But I think in year two, and we saw it a little bit towards the end of last season when the spotlight was less on the Browns because they sort of were out of the playoff run, they need to get that chemistry going.
Yeah, I think they definitely will, either in training camp or just a couple weeks into the game, because it definitely showed. It showed weeks 16 and 17, really. I think Odell had great games then, not 16, but 17 definitely. He had a great game, even when he was showing evident like fatigue from his injury. And we were running more play action than ever, and Odell was just getting open. So I think that's what play action can do for wide receivers. And obviously Baker played better in play action. So I think the chemistry will get there when they actually play their correct personnel, and Baker's succeeding, and Baker has confidence in Odell, and I think that'll come.
All right, so Browns culture, what are 3 hot takes you have for the Browns this year?
I think number one, Baker. I guess if we're going really hot take, Baker finishes in a MVP race. I don't know what it is. I think it's top 5 or whatever they count, top 3, top 5. I think that can be our number one hot take. And then I think Odell could, leading the league in yards as a wide receiver, could definitely be one. I think that's a possibility if he really, really gets open on deep threats and Baker trusts him, and that all works. And I think number 3 is Myles Garrett breaking the sack record, plus 20, which I think he's definitely capable of doing. He just has to become more consistent at it, because in 10 games he got 10 sacks, but I don't know the exact numbers, but I think the first like 3 games of the season, he had 7 sacks or so, and it dropped off really dramatically. And I think inconsistency showed beyond the whole offensive line with Larry Ogunjobi and Vernon and Sheldon Richardson.
Yeah, those are interesting takes, especially since I think with that Kevin Stefanski coming in, I think my prediction was there was going to be a little bit more of a run-heavy offense, especially with the dual threat in the backfield. So I was thinking you would lean more towards, Nick Chubb going for like the all-time rushing record or stuff like that. But clearly you have faith in Baker and Odell, that combination. I think Odell could easily lead the league in yards per catch. I think he's going to have a lot of big plays this year. I don't know if with Jarvis Landry and Austin Hooper and those kind of security blanket guys that I talked about with those sure hands, that Baker clearly seems to have a little bit more of a connection with Jarvis already, that he will be able to rack up enough catches to get to lead the league in receiving yards, but it's an interesting take, definitely. And I think when you take a quarterback first overall, you hope that he can reach top 5 in the MVP voting. So definitely on track for that one.
Yeah, with the run game, I kind of overshadow it for like no reason because I'm all for Baker, and obviously the run game is a big part of play action based offense, and that'll be a big part of Baker's success. But that's not really something I worry about because I know it's going to be great. I know Nick Chubb's going to be phenomenal. So I worry some more about Odell and Hooper and them becoming great and Baker becoming great.
I definitely could see Baker Mayfield being that top 5 discussion for MVP. Like I said, I'm a fan of Baker Mayfield. I think all these quarterbacks in the division, I'm still don't know about Big Ben, are going to have good seasons. Honestly, I was a big fan of Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, obviously. And I think Big Ben, if he's healthy, he could do some damage. So I think Baker Mayfield does have the potential to really be successful this season. So I definitely agree with that. But I do agree more with Brooks that I feel like this is going to be more of a run-heavy team. I don't know about Odell just because of how run-heavy it's going to be. And going back to that Stephon Diggs comparison, I think Stephon's biggest problem was Minnesota's trying to go more to Dalvin Cook as the main ingredient of the offense, run the football down more. I think that caused a lot of problems. And I wouldn't be surprised if Browns are really run heavy all these weeks, and Odell's like, hey, I want the ball. We see some diva action going on, and Browns maybe trade him. I don't know. I'm not sold on Odell Beckham yet in this offense just because of how run heavy I believe it's going to be.
Yeah, I think we've definitely thought. Our front office has really thought out every option of Odell, that he either wildly succeeds or he just wildly fails in Cleveland. And we've got security blankets with. We're obviously not replacing him, but we obviously got Damian Ratley as a deep threat, and then we got Tony Brown as a deep threat. He was an undrafted free agent, and then I think his name's Jamarcus Bradley. I might got him mixed up, but he's a deep threat. So we definitely have deep threat options. We definitely have deep threat options to kind of have a security blanket for Odell, even though it's not even close to replacing him. But we're definitely high on Odell, or they're high on Odell, and I think they expect him to really take off as a deep threat.
All right, finally, I would love Logan for a record prediction for the Browns for this upcoming year.
I've done multiple scenarios of bad seasons and great seasons, and I think I've mediumed out at an 8-8 or a 9-7 year. I think we're going to be an overall really solid team. I like it. I like the roster with the coaching staff and the front office. The defense could struggle a little bit, but I love the overall philosophy that we switched to this year, which is primary run stop. I think that comes at the cost of coverage, but we've really toned in on stopping quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and even Patrick Mahomes at running the ball. So I think we're gonna have a good season either way. But 8-8 or 9-7 is my safe bet.
Yeah, I would put their ceiling as a lot higher. I think that is probably where I would have them too ending up. But if you look at their season last year, they ended up 6-10, but they were shooting right around that 8-8 mark. until that whole incident and debacle with Myles Garrett happened. I think they sort of tailed off at that point and gave up on their season because at that moment they were actually still in the wild card race. And I think they definitely improved and have a lot more room for growth than they did all of last season. So I think they're shooting for something a little bit higher. But just the reasons we've said in this podcast, I think they're going to be aiming for and happy with a 8-8, 9-7 type year, just to sort of get back on track and know that they can really build something here. I think anything less, they're going to have to really look at this roster. And even though it is loaded with talent, I think they're going to have to start dumping pieces and acquiring draft picks to sort of decide if this is the direction they want to go with the future of the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, this offense it's a lot more complicated than last year, which is why I feel we could struggle. That's kind of the only reason besides Baker Mayfield not playing well, which is ultimately on the offense and the team. So I think if the offensive line adapts to the zone-based scheme, which I think some will, I think like guys like J.C. Treader won't, Wyatt Teller won't, but Dedrick Wills, Joel Bitonio, and Jack Conklin, I think they'll be great in it. But we obviously have a whole center and right guard starting wise. I think Nick Harris is a good center for the offense. Reason why we picked him. Now I think Chris Hubbard could come and play right guard, which would pretty much complete the offense, aligned scheme wise. But I think it's definitely a downgrade on talent.
Hypothetically, if the Browns and Baker were to lead the Browns to another 6-10 season, do you think it would be time for Cleveland to move on from him, or would you still hold out and try to build something with him?
I think if we have another pretty disappointing season and there isn't much to blame besides Baker, I think we go Case Keenum. I think he's an amazing quarterback for Kevin Stefanski's offense, and he showed that in Minnesota. And then maybe at that point we evaluate Odell and our options and look for a trade for him perhaps. But I just don't think it's going to get that far. So I think
Are you saying Case Keenum comes in during this season, or are you saying he would take over next year? If you're on track for 6-10, looking at the same record that they did last season, do you think Baker finishes the year?
It depends how bad he's playing, because if he's really racking up the interceptions, if he's really playing bad, then there's no point to not play Case Keenum. If we're not going to make the playoffs, you play Case Keenum for the potential of next year or the future years of him at quarterback one.
Yeah, I think Browns fans are just really hoping that Baker and Lamar does not become another Trubisky and Mahomes situation.
Oh, God, I hope not. I actually was a fan of Trubisky coming out of the draft, and now I just look like an idiot. I hope that's not the case. I hope they become the next Flacco and Big Ben, because I know Big Ben's going to retire soon. Burrow is in Cincinnati, and they're just all over the place. I don't know about that. So I really do hope Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson take that next big rivalry in the AFC North. And I do think that's going to factor into the Browns' schedule and their record, because I do have them at 8-8, 9-7. But if the Steelers aren't that good with an old Big Ben, and the Bengals are still a 5-11, 3-11, 2-11 team, I do think Browns could easily get to the 10, 11 wins, maybe challenge the Ravens for a division title. It all depends on how the other teams factor in and how does Baker Mayfield work this season. His offense, because it is make or break. If he doesn't produce and the interceptions don't drop and the numbers don't go up and this team wins don't go up, the Browns are going to have to move for Baker Mayfield, as much as I wouldn't want them to. I'm a big fan of him, but it is do or die, I believe. And Case Keenum, he's very interesting because he does show flashes that he could be a really good starting quarterback. I just don't know if he would be like a long year, term, like a long year plan. I think he'll be like a come in, win some games for you, but then next year you're back at looking at the draft for a quarterback.
Yeah, and that's kind of in the story of Case Keenum's career as a journeyman. But he did have that success in Minnesota in this style of offense. So I think it sort of depends on what the outlook of the Browns season is. And I think it was a smart move to bring him aboard. He's a veteran. He's known as a class act, stand-up guy, someone to be behind Baker, give him a little bit of advice, and also apply a little bit of pressure on him. I think Baker got a little comfortable back there and knew he was sort of the face of this team, and it sort of stopped him from, making some of these throws and doing some of these plays to put himself out there. And hopefully, with Case Keenum right there behind him, they did give him big money for a backup. We saw the money that Winston and Cam got. These guys took small contracts, not the case for Case Keenum. So I think they definitely brought him in to be more than just, a number on the depth chart. They want him there to help Baker and to apply a little pressure to make him actually perform.
Yeah, it's all about competition for us, and I think that stems further than our prior GM and John Dorsey. I think that comes from Paul DePodesta, who is our chief strategy expert, I'm pretty sure, and then Jimmy Haslam, who's obviously, what I've said, he's become a good football mind. I think he loves competition on the roster, and I think he wants Paul DePodesta and the GM to put competition on the roster. But I could be mistaken. I'm not sure. But it's all about competition, and that's the culture we've built all the way from John Dorsey.
All right, so I think that's all we're going to have today. Does anyone have any final words?
Check out Browns Culture on Instagram for great Browns content. I think it's a worthwhile follow.
I'm just going to say, Odell Beckham, you should be very afraid of my man Marlon Humphrey because he's coming for you again. It's not going to be good.
I just want to thank you guys for your continued loyalty, listening to the pod. I expect these Browns-Ravens matchups this year to be fairly competitive. I would look out for a little bit more intensity. I think the Browns kind of want to come after the Ravens. We're sitting on our throne in the division. Baker was the first overall pick the year that Lamar went 32, and then Kyrie already hit it, that Marlon Humphrey-Odell Beckham matchup in that little fight they had week 4. I think things could get very chippy, sort of like those old-fashioned Ravens-Steelers game. So that's something to watch out for.
All I got to say is I can't wait to see Mark Ingram versus Grant Delpit in the open field. And we'll see if Browns fans by the end of the year will be wearing coronavirus masks or paper bags over their face. That's all we have for this week, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We're looking forward to bringing you more episodes of this podcast each and every Friday. You can also listen to the show on all your favorite streaming services, including Apple Music, Spotify, and any of the other podcast apps you may listen to, such as CastBox, Podcast app, Google Podcasts. It's going to be available on all those apps, so we have you covered. Make sure to leave a review and follow the pod to stay up to date on the latest on all the latest updates for this pod. The Instagram handle for it, once again, is at Everything Ravens Podcast. Also, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Everything_Ravens. A big shout out goes to Chiefs Direct and Chiefs.Hive, Sam and Matt, for helping us do this podcast today. They were both excellent. Also, another shout out goes to Brooks and Kyrie for making the podcast run smoothly. They are great co-hosts each and every week. Make sure to follow them. Their handles are in the bio of at Everything Ravens Podcast. Also, a big shout out to Spencer Silverstein, our executive producer. He's the hardest worker here. He does a fantastic job making sure this podcast can run smoothly for your entertainment. He does all the dirty work, the behind the scenes stuff. Make sure to edit this, get this podcast up and running. Also, make sure to follow Jack Davis, our music producer, at I'm Jack Average on Instagram. All of their handles should be in the bio of Everything Ravens Podcast. Thank you guys once again for listening. You guys are a huge reason why this podcast can keep going the way it does. So have a good day and go Ravens.
They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.
No copyright intended. All content rights go to their respective owners.